string, here you are keeping empty. Man, whenever you are declaring first time, you need to keep the generic type. Whenever you are creating the object, you no need to keep that generic type. If you want here also, you can keep it, but not required. If you want here also, you can keep it, but it is not required. Got it? Already I have specified the response entity is a string type. Even if I don't specify here, that's no problem. No problem. Okay? Core Java. People are weak in core Java. You got my point? Are you clear with this one? Good? Perfect. So with this we have understood what is controller based exception handling and what is global exception handling. Now next question, how to handle user defined exceptions? How to handle user defined exceptions? Guys, able to follow me? Okay, now we are going to understand how to handle user defined exceptions. How to handle user defined exceptions. Cool. Now let me create one requirement. Let me create one controller class. Let me create one REST controller. New class. Ticket REST controller. Now I'm creating one ticket REST controller. Ticket REST controller. Now here I'm taking one annotation called @REST controller. @REST controller. Inside this I'm writing one method public response entity of string get status. String PNR. Okay. Now PNR I'm expecting as a input, which I'm expecting as a path variable. I'm expecting as a path variable. Good. Now @get mapping. @get mapping slash ticket slash status slash PNR. Is it okay, guys? Is it okay? Is it okay? Public response entity of string get status. I have taken one method called get status. In this method, I am taking a method parameter called string PNR, which is path variable, @path variable. So I'm taking path variable. I'm taking path variable. Now, in this method, I want to throw some exception, no data found exception. With this given PNR, I don't have any data. I want to throw no data found exception. So do you know how to create a user-defined exception? Do you know how to create a user-defined exception in the Java? Come on. I have taken one class with a name called no data found exception, which is extending from runtime exception. Inside this, I can write one method and I can write one constructor, 0-param constructor, no data found exception, string message. Then I'm going to take super of message. Can I say this is my user defined exception class? This is user defined exception. This is user defined exception. Can I say public class no data found exception extends runtime exception? Now I am taking 0-param constructor in this class and I am taking parameterized constructor also in this class. Okay, this is one user defined exception. Can I throw user defined exception in this method? Can I throw user defined exception in this method? Throw new user defined exception. Throw user defined exception. No, that is user defined exception means throw new no data found exception. Throw new no data found exception, no ticket found. No ticket found. Yes, perfect. So whenever you send a request to get the ticket status with the PNR number, what this method is doing? This is my REST controller, guys. This is my REST controller. What my REST controller is doing here? Can you tell me? What is my REST controller is doing here? Simple, man. Go to previous example. Greet REST controller. What this will do? It will throw arithmetic exception because you are doing a mistake. You are dividing a number with a 0. It will throw arithmetic exception. If you go to demo REST controller, then what this will do? You are doing a operation on the null value. It will throw null pointer exception. What the ticket REST controller is doing? What is there in this method? Can you see what is happening in this method? Get status method. What is happening in this method? Throwing the exception. Okay. Now, what exception we are throwing? Is it this method is going to throw user defined exception? This method is throwing a predefined exception? This method is throwing user defined exception or this method is throwing predefined exception? User defined exception. How to create a user defined exception in the Java? By extending from runtime exception. I want to create my own exception. How can I create my own exception? I'm creating public class no data found exception extends runtime exception. In this exception class, I'm taking 0-param constructor and I'm taking parameterized constructor. Just Zero param constructor, parameter constructor I'm taking, I'm extending the properties from runtime exception. So this is called user defined exception class in our project. This is my exception class. I have created this class and I'm representing this class as an exception class. Now, whenever the request comes to this REST controller method, I am throwing that user defined exception manually. I'm throwing that user defined exception manually. Okay. Now, let's start our application. Let's start our application. Run as boot app. Run as boot app. Run as boot app. Clear this. Go here. Ticket /status /PNR number. I'm giving the PNR number. Send. What happened? Which exception is coming? Which exception is coming? No data found exception. No data found exception is a user-defined exception or it is a predefined exception. No data found is a user-defined exception or no data found is a predefined exception. User-defined, we can say custom exception. Now, is there any logic available in our project to handle this custom exception? Do we have any exception handler to handle this custom exception? We don't have anything to handle this custom exception. Can we write the logic to handle the custom exception? Can we write the logic to handle the custom exception? Right? Can we do the logic to handle the custom exception? Public response entity of string handle no data found exception. Now I'm going to take no data found exception. NPE. No NDFE. No data found exception. Okay. NDFE dot get message. NDFE dot get message. NDFE dot get message. Now what I am going to tell, return new response entity of message comma http status dot bad request, because client is giving incorrect PNR, so it is a client problem. At the rate exception handler of value is equal to no data found exception. No data found exception. Okay, what is the meaning of this? This method should execute when the null pointer exception occurs. This method should execute when arithmetic exception occurs. This method should execute when the no data found exception occurs. You got my point? Number cannot divide by 0. This is our problem. Operation should not perform on the null, our problem. But incorrect OTP, no data available, bad request. Status I am giving as a bad request because client is giving incorrect ticket number. Incorrect PNR number. Uska galti hai. Now send this request. No ticket found. Am I able to handle that exception got no ticket found? Whenever request comes to this method, here I am throwing no ticket found. I am throwing user-defined exception. How to handle the user-defined exception? Same thing. How we are handling null pointer and arithmetic exception? Similarly, we are able to handle the user-defined exception also. Now, whenever you send a request for the ticket status with the PNR number, the REST controller method throwing no data found exception. For no data found exception, there is a handler method. Now, request will come to this method. This method is throwing user-defined exception. This user-defined exception we are handling in the exception handler class. This method is going to execute whenever no data found exception occurs in the project. Are you able to follow me? What is controller based exception handling? What is global exception handling? how to handle user-defined exceptions. How to handle user-defined exceptions. Okay. User-defined exception, creating custom exception handling, or we can say user-defined exception handling. Guys, all these videos, these topics already I have explained in the video. So, shall I show you? In the YouTube, all these topics I have explained. I just don't want to give you only videos. I don't want to skip the classroom content. That's the reason I'm explaining in the class also. If you see exception handling topic very clearly, I have explained in the videos. Spring Boot exception handling. 1 year back, I have explained that concept. 1 year back, I have explained that concept. Spring Boot exception handling introduction, controller-based exception handling, global exception handling, handling user-defined exception, Spring Boot exception handling in the REST API. All the 5 videos, almost 1 hour I have explained on the exception handling part. Those videos are already available in the YouTube. Those videos are already available in the YouTube. Yes or no? Can you see these videos when I have uploaded? When I have uploaded that video? 2019, 2 years back, 3 years back, 2.5 years back I have uploaded exception handling videos. People will not watch because free, na? Anything we are giving for free, you don't take it. This is the link. Exception handling. All these things I have discussed it there. Okay. All right. Guys, are you able to understand? Controller-based exception handling, controller-based exception handling, global exception handling, and how to create user-defined exception and how to handle user-defined exception. Right. Now, let's take this. User-defined exception handling. User-defined exception handling. User-defined exception handling. This is creating one user-defined exception that is called no data found exception. Now, I'm taking one ticket rest controller. In this, I am throwing the exception manually. Jan Bujke, I'm throwing this exception to test my code. To test my code, I'm throwing this exception. Okay. Then after, in the global exception handler, I'm writing this method. This is used to handle that exception. Whenever the no data found exception occurs, then I want this method to execute. Whenever no data found exception occurs, then I want this method to execute. Okay. Creating user-defined exception here. Creating user-defined exception here. Now, throwing exception here. Throwing user-defined exceptions manually. Throwing user-defined exception manually. I am throwing the user-defined exception manually. Handling user-defined exception. In this scenario, handling user-defined exception. Handling user-defined exception. Is this clear? Is this clear for everyone? Look at this code. Look at this code. Explain the flow once again. Vibor, there is nothing like a flow here, sir. request is coming to the REST controller. In the REST controller, exception is occurring. Whenever exception occurs, it will check, do we have any handler to handle that exception? If there is a handler to handle the exception, that method will execute. Otherwise, it will show the exception stack trace. That's it. There is no specific flow here. Simple, straightforward. Whenever exception occurs in the program, it is going to check, do we have any handler to handle that exception? If there is a handler, that handler will execute to handle it. Otherwise, exception stack trace will come. That's it. There is nothing like a magic. It is simple, straightforward. Exception occurred. Handler is available or not. If a handler is available, it will execute. Otherwise, if a handler is available, it will execute. Otherwise, it will not execute. That's it. If there is a clash between local and global exception, which will prevail? If there is a clash between local and global exception, which will prevail? So here, one of our person is asking, sir, I will do exception handling locally as well as globally. He's saying that I will do the exception handling both locally and globally. Then priority will be there for which one he is asking. Now, here, welcome, it is going to give null pointer exception will come. Here, null pointer exception method, I will write inside controller as well as inside the global handler. Which one will execute? Operation on null is not allowed. It is local handling. It is local handling. If this message comes, that means local is priority. If this message comes, then global is priority. Optional is an optional operation. Operation on null is not allowed. Operation on null is not allowed. Local handling or global handling. Check करो किसको वो priority दे रहा है. /welcome. /welcome. Which one is getting priority? Which one is getting priority? Prasad, you asked this question. Which one priority? Local is the priority. Okay? Class level. Whenever exception is occurring, inside the class, first it will check within the class, is there any handler available? If the handler is available within the class, then it will handle here only. If a handler is not available here, then it will go to global handler and it will handle the exception globally. It will handle the exception globally. Okay guys, able to understand easily how can we handle exceptions? Very good. Very good. Good. Now, guys, I have given the link to watch the exception handling videos. In our YouTube channel, they are available. So you can go through them once again. Very nicely, I have explained exception handling. Tomorrow, we have a class, regular time. Tomorrow, we are going to discuss on Heroku Cloud. We have developed REST API. How to now? I have developed REST API. Where my REST API is running? In my local system. Can you access this REST API? Can you access this REST API in your local system? I have developed REST API in my system. Can you access this REST API in your system? No. This REST API I can access only in my system. Tomorrow, you people will be able to access my REST API. That is where cloud concept comes into picture. I will show you how to deploy this REST API into cloud tomorrow. Heroku Cloud. I'm going to show you how to deploy our REST API into Heroku Cloud tomorrow. Once we have done this cloud deployment, then we will go for client development for the REST APIs. Okay, guys? Yeah. So, thank you. Please practice this exception handling before coming to tomorrow session. Data JPA मैं plan करता हूँ, जितेंद्र. मैं plan करता हूँ भाई. Definitely I will take it. Don't worry. Okay? Cool. Please practice exception handling before coming to tomorrow's session. Thank you. I will see you tomorrow. Thank you guys. Good night.